This is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com with your Sunday update for this 17th day of October 2010. And now for the real news. In our top story this week, stunning documents have been unearthed exposing a secret Canadian government program to prepare for the roundup and internment of over 16,000 Canadian citizens and the close surveillance of another 50,000 Canadians under the cover of fighting communism. The plan, going by the name PROFUNC, included potential detainees' names, ages, physical descriptions, photographs, descriptions of vehicles, family details, and even details on which door RCMP officers should use in each person's home when they were to be rounded up.
According to new details of the plan unearthed by the Fifth Estate and Radio-Canada's Enquête, people deemed by the RCMP to be security risks could be detained indefinitely, subject to severe discipline, and even shot for trying to escape detention. The plan was so secret, the Federal Solicitor General Robert Kaplan, who was officially responsible for overseeing it, told the CBC he didn't even know it existed when he was minister in the early 80s.
The program, referred to as a contingency plan by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, called for the arrest and forcible detainment of Canadians that the bureaucrats accused of communist sympathies, including even the man who eventually became the Attorney General of Manitoba, Roland Penner. Anyone detained under the plan was to be treated as a prisoner with a carefully prescribed regimen of military discipline. The rules actually allowed officers to kill anyone attempting to escape the internment camps. The plan was top secret, and there was no form of judicial oversight over the lists and no scrutiny of who was being placed on them or why. Even Canada's Federal Solicitor General was not informed of the plan, which was enacted in 1950 and not stopped until the early 1980s. Now there is indication that the plan may actually have been enacted to deal with one of Canada's most famous national emergencies, the FLQ crisis in October 1970, in which Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau invoked the War Measures Act and implemented martial law to deal with a hostage crisis involving two government officials.
No, I still go back to the choice that you have to make in the kind of society that you live in.
Well, there's a lot of bleeding hearts around who just don't like to see people with helmets and guns. All I can say is go on and bleed, but it's more important to keep law and order in this society than to be worried about weak-kneed people who don't like the looks of a soldier.
At any cost? At any cost? How far would you go with that? How far would you extend that?
Well, just watch me.
Although long interpreted as insight into Trudeau's hubris, those words may have been more than merely posturing. The records indicate that the Montreal police had only 60 names on their list of FLQ sympathizers when the War Measures Act was invoked. Quebec's provincial police, however, did not think that 60 names sounded like enough, so the RCMP provided hundreds more, and within hours of the War Measures Act implementation, over 500 people were under arrest for supposed association with the FLQ, including many with communist associations in their background, but no link whatsoever to the FLQ. These names are presumed to have been supplied from the PROFUNC list. Ironically, the program was ended by accident on an order from then Attorney General Robert Kaplan, responding to complaints by some Canadians that they have difficulty traveling abroad due to security concerns. At the time, Kaplan did not even know of the existence of the program, nor that his order effectively ended PROFUNC, at least in its admitted form. Although Canadians have expressed shock at the existence of such a program, mass detentions and roundups of peaceful and law-abiding citizens have occurred in Canada's past.
The federal government under Prime Minister Mackenzie King forced 22,000 Japanese Canadians from their homes in British Columbia. They were sent to internment camps or relocation centers. Their properties and belongings were sold at public auctions. 3 years later, in 1944, the Dominion Elections Act was amended. It now denied the vote to Japanese Canadians forced to move from British Columbia to other provinces. Provinces from where they had not been previously disqualified.
The plans closely resemble similar plans developed in the United States under the Master Contingency Plan known as Operation Garden Plot.
FEMA has built prisons around the country, and they've also built underground facilities. It actually turns out that they are the key agency to implement a plan known as Operation Garden Plot, the plan to put American citizens in prison camps. Under Executive Order 12919, signed by Bill Clinton on June 3, 1993, presidential authority under a 1950s Defense Production Act was delegated to the Secretaries of Defense, Agriculture, Treasury, and Commerce to seize all civilian property for the government solely by declaring them necessary for national defense. It also gave the Director of FEMA the authority to implement FEMA plans during a national emergency. Most people don't realize that this country has been in a declared state of emergency since the Federal Emergency Act was enacted in 1933, which was the beginning of FEMA, and also gave presidents the authority to issue executive orders. Each president since then has issued an executive order declaring a state of national emergency.
A declaration of national emergency was declared on September 14, 2001, in the wake of the September 11th events, and has been renewed by Presidents Bush and Obama every year since, with the latest renewal signed by Obama on September 10, 2010. One of the key contingency plans developed under Operation Garden Plot was known as REX84, short for Readiness Exercise 1984, which was written by Iran-Contra conspirator and Fox News personality Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, and called for the detention of an unspecified number of Americans during times of civil unrest.
Colonel North, in your work at the NSC, were you not assigned at one time to work on plans for the continuity of government in the event of a major disaster? Mr. Chairman.
I believe that question touches upon a highly sensitive and classified area, so may I request that you not touch upon that, sir.
I was particularly concerned, Mr. Chairman, because I read in Miami papers and several others that there had been a plan developed by that same agency, a contingency plan in the event of emergency that would suspend the American Constitution. And I was deeply concerned about it and wondered if that was the area in which he had worked. I believe that it was.
May I most respectfully request that that matter not be touched upon at this stage. If we wish to get into this, I'm certain arrangements can be made for an executive session.
REX84 was modeled on a 1970 Army War College report by ex-FEMA head Louis Giuffrida, which called for the roundup of 21 million African Americans in the event of a black uprising in the U.S. In related news, the slow march toward the full implementation of martial law in the United States, which has been taking place for decades, reached a crescendo this week when the Coast Guard upheld its own declaration that it is a special branch of the military with the authority to prosecute American civilians in military tribunals. This latest development comes in a decision on appeal that was issued earlier this week in the case of Eric Schein, a merchant marine officer who is being tried as a civilian in an Article 32 proceeding by the Coast Guard, which, since its transfer to the Department of Homeland Security in 2003, considers itself a branch of the military, which somehow retains its right to operate as a civil defense and police agency and to prosecute civilians. Under American law, the military is not allowed to prosecute civilians. Eric Schein appeared on the Corbett Report earlier this week to talk about his case and its ramifications.
Well, the Coast Guard, a special branch of military that I'm not in, that's not supposed to be a branch of military, that's been changed into a branch of military under the cover of the launching of the war in Iraq in March of 2003, when it was moved from not the Department of Defense, but the Department of Transportation where it resided, into the newly created Department of Homeland Security, which was originally going to be called the Department of Homeland Defense. And they are under the impression that they can file charges and civil complaint, and they're trying to say that this is an administrative proceeding, although they filed charges against me and a civil complaint. Within their own military or system of military tribunals, they've even stated within these proceedings that it's an Article 32 proceeding, that they've had me in for the last 8 years. They even went as far as in the final order that just came out, which is called a Commandant's Decision on Appeal, blamed me, somebody who they're declaring to be mentally ill, with the fact that it took 8 or 10 years for them to do this.
How can they get away with this? I mean,
because no one else is doing anything. I'm on my own against a branch of military that most people, a lot of people see it as a branch of military, even though it's not supposed to be one. A lot of people know it's not supposed to be one. A lot of people don't even know that it is saying that it's a branch of military now in Homeland Security. A lot of people don't understand the ramifications of that, to where they've moved military law, martial law, out of the Department of Defense and into the Department of Homeland Security. And I could go on, and this Coast Guard is looking to purchase submarines now. The Coast Guard is this extra-constitutional branch of military now. It's a rabid dog. They've gone over the edge. They're loading in-close weapon systems, dual Gatling phalanx, dual Gatling guns that fire 4,500 rounds per minute on Coast Guard vessels. They've built these new national security cutters. It's almost as a complementary fleet, and as if we are preparing for world war, world conflict with Europe, the European Union, if not some type of Asian Union at the same time.
Now please go to CorbettReport.com to download the audio MP3 of episode 154 of the Corbett Report podcast, The Cross of Gold, where we examine William Jennings Bryan, The Wizard of Oz, and the essence of money.